I remember distinctly the dimensions of that little cell. I could pace 3 steps in one direction before I ran into a wall. Then I had the opportunity of turning around and pacing 3 steps the other way. Inside my new little home, I had nothing to do. I had no books to read, no window to look out, no TV, telephone, radio, BlackBerry, Bluetooth. I didn't have a pencil or a piece of paper for 2,103 days. To give you a better feel for that window of time, 2,103 days equates to age 24 to age 30 in my life. Or turn your calendar ahead to the year 2020. Consider between today and 2020 the books you'll read and TV you'll watch, kids you'll raise, churches you'll create. Pretty good chunk out of a guy's life. Now, I'd been a very active guy, like each of you, on the go all the time, searching for an extra 15 minutes a week to call my mom. And suddenly I had 24 hours a day for the next nearly 6 years. I'm describing this scenario to you somewhat semi-dramatically. In no way do I intend to invite sympathy from you. But I think the most value I can be in your life, professionally and personally. Whether you come here from Ethiopia or Manila or East St. Louis, whether you're a preacher or an administrator or a spouse, whether your goal in life is to change the world or to change a diaper. The most value I can be in the few minutes we're together is to invite you into my little prison cell. There's a great deal to be learned here. So, for the next few moments, I'd like for you to try your best to smell the stench of that imaginary 2-gallon bucket in the corner I call my toilet. I'd like for you to try to feel the baking heat of a tropical summer in a tin-roof prison cell 10,000 miles away from the good life. I'd like for you to try to taste the salt, the annoying taste of salt in the corners of your mouth from the sweat and the tears and the blood. Not that you'll ever be prisoners of war, God forbid. But if I do my job this evening, I hope to convince you that the very same challenges that you and I face on a daily basis are the challenges that I face in that prison cell. And more importantly, your response to the challenge, if you're going to succeed, has to be the same recipe of responses I used over there just to survive. And one more thing. If this is already too great a stretch for you, if you're already having trouble bridging this gap in time and geography between my life experience and yours, the best I can offer you is an interesting war story, but here's the connect. Here's the touch point. Here, perhaps, is the reason your life and mine intersected this evening. There's not a person in this ballroom who has not, in the last few weeks or months, felt overwhelmed and underappreciated. Not a person here who hasn't had trouble communicating, even with those you love the most. Not a person in this audience who has not, in the last few weeks or months, had your very baseline value system challenged. So, once you get the hang of this, once you can put aside your comfort zone, give up your nice home, your nice car, your job title, your network of friends, give up your family, give all that stuff up, step into a dingy little prison cell a long way from home, and when you have that feel, I have a couple of questions I want to ask. Here's the first one. How do you survive this? What kind of tools do you have in your psychological toolbox that you'd pull out and apply to a problem like this? In the depths of despair, in cold and darkness, how do you reflect His glory? Question number 2. Since we're all part of the same brotherhood here, what about the guys next door? What about those prisoners in that cell next to yours, clinging to life by their fingernails? They're in a world of hurt. They need your help. but they don't trust you. They think you have some kind of hidden agenda. How do you get through to them? Well, the first thing you learn in a prison cell is pain. You probably figured that out. This hurts. This hurts a whole lot. Second thing, you might not suspect this. The second thing you learn in a prison cell is, well, the minutes eventually wear into hours, and the hours into days, and days into weeks, and weeks into years, and you acclimate. You really do. You learn how to breathe deeply and think about things far away, sunny beaches and warm breezes and thoughts of home, and you know what happens? You get used to this. In fact, you get so comfortable in your little prison cell that the last place you want to go is outside the cell because it's dark and lonely out here. At least you know the devil in the light. What happens is you get a restriction built up, and it's not the 8 feet between the walls. It's 8 inches between your ears. You're in a mental box. Ever been in one of those mental boxes? Uh-huh. Do your congregations get there? Do your members get there? Your kids? We all get there. I am convinced the mental boxes of our lives can be more restrictive than those walls of stone and steel that I was behind. But I don't mind telling you this. It didn't take me very many miles. At 3 steps by 3 steps, I recognized I was going nuts. I finally decided, Charlie, if you're going to survive this, if you're going to live through this, you're going to have to get creative, come up with something to do, keep your mind active. I thought, that's what I'll do. I'll make a little deck of cards. And I did. I constructed a little deck of playing cards about the size of postage stamps. I tore these cards from 52 little strips of toilet paper. And I can tell you this with authority. Toilet paper is tough to shuffle. You don't lick your fingers very much. Okay, before we get back into the prison scene and the connection between my life story and yours, let me tell you what an honor it is to be with this audience. I truly respect what you do. And just to rub elbows with the talent, the spiritual well-being in this room, it gives me a great thrill. But we've got some challenges in this outfit, don't we? We're seeing some slight decline. We're seeing challenges that we face all over the country, all over the world. How do you face those challenges of life? Well, I believe you have to pack parachutes. Let me explain that. I sat down in a restaurant not so long ago in Kansas City, where I used to live. About 2 tables over, a guy kept looking at me. I didn't recognize this gent. He stood up. This fellow walked over to my table, and he pointed at me, and he said, "You're Captain Plumb." I looked up, and I said, "Yes, sir, I'm Captain Plumb." "You're that guy. You flew jet fighters in Vietnam. You're a fighter pilot. Part of that Top Gun outfit. You were shot down off the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. You parachuted into enemy hands. You spent 6 years as a prisoner of war." Somewhat dumbfounded, I looked up at this guy and I said, "How in the world did you know all that?" He finally broke into a smile as he said, "Because I packed your parachute." Tell you this, for this guy that runs around the country making speeches, suddenly I was speechless. The best I could do was stagger to my feet, reach out a very grateful hand of thanks. He came up with just the proper words. The guy grabbed my hand, he pumped my arm, and he said, "I guess it worked." I said, "Indeed it did, my friend, and I must tell you I've said a lot of prayers of thanks for your nimble fingers, but I had no idea I'd ever have the opportunity of expressing my gratitude in person." He said, "Were all the panels there?" I said, I must be honest with you, they weren't. Of the 18 panels I was supposed to have in that parachute, it had only 15 good ones. 3 of the panels were torn, but it wasn't your fault, it was mine. I ejected from that F-4 Phantom jet at 600 knots, close to the ground. That's what tore the panels on the parachute. You did your job, I didn't do mine. I said, "But let me ask you a question. Do you keep track of all the parachutes you pack? Do you know of all the lives you've saved?" Guy said, "No. Now, this is the most important part of the conversation at night, and it may be the most important thing I say to you this evening. And I think it deals directly with LCEF and your mission and your responsibility and your individual passion. Here's what he said. He said, no, I don't keep track of all the parachutes I pack. It's enough gratification for me just to know that I've served. Here's a sailor well below the waterline of this aircraft carrier. His job is to stand at a long wooden table. He weaves the shrouds and he folds the silk panels of these parachutes and he passes them along one after another, just doing his job 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day. While the jet jockey, while the top gun zooms around the sky at the speed of sound, I couldn't have cared less about the guy down there in the hole until one day my parachute came along. And he packed mine up for me. Isn't that what ministry is all about? Packing parachutes. Being the behind-the-scenes assistance for those who are spreading the gospel. So the question becomes, how's your parachute packing coming along? Who is it that looks to you for strength in times of need? Maybe more importantly, how's your parachute packed? Well, mine was pretty well packed. When I was shot down over enemy territory, my physical parachute, 15 of 18 panels, that was enough. My mental parachute had the skills of my craft, fighter pilot, naval officer, engineer. My emotional parachute, pretty stable guy. My spiritual parachute, I knew the Lord. All that parachute packing began in a little bitty town in Kansas, Lecompton, Kansas, town of some 325 souls, and a couple of Presbyterians. I couldn't say that if I weren't a Presbyterian. Although after listening to Reverend Gray, I might just have to transfer to your school. That little town, I was a Boy Scout, through the newspaper, and went to the only church in town, the Evangelical United Brethren Church. That was our church. While I was a prisoner of war, the EUB, Evangelical United Brethren, became Methodist. They didn't ask me. But we had a great little church there, and I was part of the youth fellowship and sang in the choir and learned a lot from a lot of people, preachers and teachers and coaches. A coach, I'll never forget, named Smith. If Clarence Smith were still alive, I would have called him from Garden Grove to thank that guy for packing my parachute. Thank him for giving me some of those nuggets I was going to need when the going got tough. This is ragtag basketball. We lost and lost and lost. Last game of the season, we lost again. One dejected 13-year-old lad, imagine, wandering off to the locker room. Here comes the coach. This guy had shrapnel in his leg from his war, and he walked with a limp, but he caught up with me. And I felt his arm over my sweaty shoulder. The last guy I wanted to talk to was the coach. I looked at the coach, a tough disciplinarian. All I could think of to say was, I'm sorry, coach, I guess this team's just a bunch of losers. The coach squeezed my shoulder. He sunk his fingernails into the flesh. He said something I shall never forget. He said, son, whether you think you're a loser or whether you think you're a winner, you're right. I didn't understand that. I asked him the next day at school, Coach, what did that mean? Just this, he said, life is a choice. Every day of your life is a beautiful choice. I don't care where you go. He said, I don't care what kind of a scrape you get yourself into someday, you can choose. You can choose your attitude, happiness or sadness. You can choose profit or loss. You can choose health or sickness. You can choose life or death. He said, now there's one more choice. When the going is tough and the margins are thin and the competition is high and you're all out of ideas and you want to quit, you can always choose to give away all those other choices. You can absolutely elect to step back and become the victim, or you can step forward and become the victor. It's your choice. Well, with that kind of inspiration and motivation, as you might suspect, I graduated from that little grade school, top of my class of 2. And the other guy wasn't all that bright. I don't know how much you knew at age 17. I was a hayseed from Kansas. I had never seen the ocean. I'd never ridden in an airplane at age 17. What I did know was I needed an education. My parents couldn't afford to send me to college, so I started looking for scholarships. I got an appointment to Annapolis. Unbelievable. I had no idea what they did in Annapolis. But I got on that Greyhound bus in Kansas City, Kansas. 2 days later, as Randy Peterson and General Freitag and Captain Mark and several of the rest of you in this crowd have done, I was pledging to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. What a commitment that was. And I had no idea what it was going to take to fulfill it. Well, I learned a lot there at the boat school. I got involved in an organization called the Christian Union League. We were trained as midshipmen at the Naval Academy to be lay leaders aboard ships where chaplains weren't available. There are not enough chaplains in the Navy to go aboard every ship. And so we were trained to be lay leaders. And so we learned a little about it. We gathered in the basement of Bancroft Hall every Thursday evening. They call us the Bible Thumpers. And we learned just a little bit about how to organize a church service aboard ship. Little did I realize that would serve me greatly and serve the men I think that I served with in those prison camps. Chapel was compulsory at the Naval Academy in those days. Everybody had to go to chapel. And everybody had to memorize the midshipman prayer, and I'll never forget that prayer. Give me the strength, give me the courage, and if I should miss the mark, give me the strength and courage to try again. And that went through my mind 1,000 times over those next few years. I graduated from Annapolis. Now, from that school, I didn't graduate top of my class. In fact, from Annapolis, I graduated in the half of the class that made the top half possible. This was the dirty job, but somebody I threw that hat in the air. I pinned on those officer bars. What a proud day in my life as I married my high school sweetheart, a lovely blonde girl from Kansas, under the Arch of Swords. It was a military wedding, picture perfect. Flight training, Pensacola, Florida, Beeville, Texas, Meridian, Mississippi, out to here, as Rich told you, Miramar, California. It's down by San Diego, where I helped start the Top Gun school. Exciting times for this 23-year-old kid. Launched on the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk, a floating city. You saw the picture. 5,000 men on this ship. And I stood on the flight deck and I looked down at the pier and I picked out my wife and I waved to her and I promised her I'd be back in 8 months. And I almost made it. Almost made it. Rich also told you, 5 days from the end of my tour. 74 successful combat missions, over 100 carrier landings, a pretty well-seasoned jet fighter pilot, and 5 days to go. Let me tell you about that day. The day I was shot down. Maybe you've had a day like this. Well, it started out nice enough. Puffy clouds and blue skies out there on Yankee Station, and check this. Look at this. 24 years old, in command of a multi-gazillion-dollar airplane. See this hand? I have 2 throttles here. I shove these throttles into the afterburners. I can go 1,400 miles an hour, and that's a long way from a John Deere. You see this finger? I pulled the trigger on my control stick and released the missile from underneath my wings, and I can knock down enemy airplanes I can't even see. I really am the best of the best. I really am the Top Gun. I am the guy that always stands tall. I'm the one that's never afraid. Hey, I'm probably bulletproof. How about it? You ever feel bulletproof? When things are really going well, you know, economy is good, attendance in your church is up, okay? Get this brand new pastor and he's laying it on them, okay? Feel bulletproof? Here's the advice when you start feeling bulletproof. Check your 6 o'clock position. You got a missile back there sneaking up your tail. We were hit. The SAM, surface-to-air missile, exploded with some 12,000 pounds of jet fuel, sent that airplane topsy-turvy, end over end down towards that rice paddy below. My co-pilot ejected, our parachutes opened, and we came floating down over enemy territory. Ever been in one of those parachutes? But I don't mean the nylon ones. I'm talking about those parachutes of life. Talking about the little fender benders that you and I get ourselves into once in a while. I'm talking about something as insignificant as being cut out of your lane on the highway, something as major as the loss of a child. But really, isn't that where your value lies? Let's try to measure the value of you, all right? I mean, just hypothetically. What's your value to your congregation? What's your value to your company? What's your value to your family? What's your value to your God? You see, I don't think it can be measured in the easy times. Anybody can show up. Your true value shows up when you don't know the answer and you're confused and you're frustrated and everybody's on your case. Your value shows up when you want to quit and your boss wants you to quit. Or what if you had the perfect world? Let's think, hypothetically, okay? What if everyone you met was a prince or a princess and they all said yes to all your great ideas? Would you be as good as you are today? Would you get up as early? Would you dress as neat? Would we be as proactive? Would there even be an LCF if we had no problems in the Missouri Synod? Here's the point. Here's the point. Hang in there. You're not going to believe this at first. I hope I can prove it to you. Here's the point. There's great value in getting blown out of the sky once in a while. There's great value in that wake-up call that forces you and me to re-examine the way we're doing business. Because adversity is a horrible thing to waste. If that's true, the next question is really easy. Yeah, but Captain, how do you turn it around? How do you take all this negative stuff that's falling on my head and turn it into something positive? Life hands me a lemon. What's the recipe for lemonade? How do you do it? I don't know. All I can tell you is what happened to me. I felt the opening shock of the parachute. As I had been trained as a fighter pilot, I immediately looked up and I counted the panels in my parachute. That technique is called assessing your support group. I looked into the unknown. They're shooting at me. The audacity of this enemy. Don't they know I'm the Top Gun? Look, they've just knocked down my multi-gazillion-dollar jet fighter, and now they are shooting at the pilot. And I'll tell you this. Now, you can identify with this one. When you're dodging bullets, it's tough to come up with a long-range plan. So what would you do? I know what you do. You do exactly what I did. I took a deep breath. I let about half of it out. I tried to calm myself, and I bowed my head, and I said a prayer. I'll never forget that prayer. I thought about that prayer a lot over those next 6 years in those various prison cells I was in. I thought back to that moment in time, and I'm dangling from that parachute and saying to myself, well, dummy, why didn't you make a deal with God? You know, promise to be a righteous, sober, godly guy the rest of my life. Lord, all I need from you is a little wind. 10, 12 miles an hour, gusting to 40, please. I guess I didn't feel in much of a negotiable position, so I just prayed for the guts it was going to take to survive. I prayed that there might be some value in this pain. And I prayed for my wife. Remember the lady I had married under the Arch of Swords? See, this was my war and not hers. And yet at the end of the Vietnam War, she would feel more pain from that war than I did. I hit the ground. I sunk about waist deep in a rice paddy. I was descended upon by about a gazillion of the enemy. They stripped me of everything I had. They took my flight gear, my clothing, my personal possessions. They even took my name. And they gave me a name from their language just to humiliate me for the next nearly 6 years. Dragged me around village to village, camp to camp, tortured for 2 days with ropes and irons. And that's when they tossed me into this little cell. The one I described to you from the very beginning. I wasn't kidding you an inch.